Good evening, my tired student. I must admit, I'm a little concerned that you slept through the entire day. Are you sure you are not some vampire who fears the burning embrace of the sun? I jest, of course. While the aristocracy of the night have many clever ways to hide their affliction, they have yet to invent a method of hiding that can obscure them from me. In any event, it seems that your mysterious assailant took more than just your memory of the incident, almost as if it drained the very energy of your soul. Worry not, you are welcome to recover here until you regain your strength. Once you feel well enough, I will put you to work around here during the day, so you can earn your keep. After all, I have some gardening that needs doing. Simple enough work, I assure you, though it does take some time, as my crops are well nourished by the wealth of corpses buried deep beneath the soil. Oh, do not look so nervous, my young pupil. I merely buried them all. In fact, I was the one who struck down the creature that turned the once humble town of Grinstadt into a gore-coated ruin. Here, drink some ale, while I tell you about the haunting nightmare that exterminated the poor folk who now nourish my land. The Wicker Man. Contrary to what the macabre nature of my garden may suggest, I was quite fond of the people that lived within the town of Grinstadt. Every time my travels would bring me back to the Empire, I would ensure that my route would pass by, so I could visit old friends and offer various trinkets I had collected to their children as gifts. This would prove to be a mistake, as while my visits ensured their continued prosperity in ways that mattered to humble farmers and hunters, it also drew the attention of a more sinister force. It was on a frosty eve in Ulrichseit that I would learn the cost to my naive acts. I had been making haste to arrive in Grinstadt before the winter solstice, so that I might be present for the festivities, when I emerged from the Drakewald, and the wind carried to me the unmistakable stench of burning flesh. Cracking the reins with growing concern, the steeds pulling my cart strained with effort as I pushed them harder and harder to crest the great hill that overlooks this land, just north of here. You may have seen it on your approach, as you mentioned you ventured here from the west. I will never forget the sinking feeling I felt in my stomach, as the light pouring over the cliff was far too bright and hungry for any wholesome blaze. When I finally leapt free of my seat and ran to the edge, the heat blasted me, and my eyes adjusted to drink in the hellish scene below. Grinstadt had been annihilated. The many homes and shops that had stood for generations, little more than heaps of rubble, that were being devoured down to ash by roaring flames. Even at that great height, I could already see that I had arrived far too late, as the dirt paths connecting the various structures were choked with corpses that had been shredded apart by some malefic entity. I descended into the inferno in hopes of finding survivors, but nothing that still drew breath remained. Men, women, children. Not a soul had been spared, and their mangled bodies were testament to the brutality with which they had met their ends. The winds of magic reeked with dar, tainted by the mass death and the terror that had consumed all their final moments. When I finally wandered into the town center, I discovered the instrument that had been used to tear all of my gentle friends apart in a frenzy of splattered gore. At the heart of the burning hell Grinstadt had become stood a gangling construct, assembled from bits of wood, metal, and sackcloth in the vague shape of a man. Motionless before me was a Wicker Man. It was instantly recognizable. They stand a fair bit taller than the common troll. The most striking feature of a Wicker Man, and what gives them away, tends to be their monstrous heads, almost comically large atop their gaunt bodies, the head often possesses jaws constructed to be yawning wide, as if locked in a perpetual scream. Here are kept a mass of corpses, forced into a bizarre mix of poses as flames endlessly belch forth, consuming flesh and fat of those poor souls within to keep that nightmarish fire burning. The greatest danger of these constructs, however, is their frightening set of claws. Fingers carefully crafted from long, curved blades, or whatever sharp tools the wizard who built them had at hand. For as you may have guessed, the Wicker Man is no true creature or beast, but a complex marionette, crafted and controlled most commonly by necromancers. As they are not alive in any true sense, the Wicker Men do not feel pain or emotion, and relentlessly pursue their objective so long as their controller remains within a mile to animate them. However, this isn't as much of a restriction as it may sound, as the intellect behind a Wicker Man can actually see and hear through their macabre puppet, and thus may hide away while still using their creation to deadly effect. It is controlled using a smaller marionette, held by a necromancer, the Wicker Man precisely copying every act that the Dark Sorcerer performs using their demented doll. Now, while this all may seem terribly frightening, I must confess that I have not revealed the true power of a Wicker Man yet. You see, while they may be awkward in appearance and suggest fragility due to their makeshift forms, this is merely an illusion. The dark ritual that animates a Wicker Man is bound into their very essence, allowing them to move with a grace and speed that would shame even the swift folk of Ulthuan. For their motion and rending attacks are only restricted by the actions performed using their controlling puppet, rather than by the logic and bounds of flesh and muscle. Furthermore, the dar coursing through their frame is what truly holds the construct together, and thus they are incredibly resistant to harm. It requires a powerful attack to do any real damage, the Wicker Man able to shrug off handgun fire and the punishing blows from an ogre with laughable ease. Back to my tale, when I discovered the Wicker Man responsible for the raising of Grinstadt, I found it resting in cruel parody of a scarecrow, arms outstretched. Rage filled my heart as I saw the chunks of charred flesh and still dripping blood that matted the construct's wicked claws. The necromancer controlling the twisted amalgamation must have noticed my presence at that point, as it jerked into motion and descended upon me in a flash. I'm sure this is where you're expecting me to say that I fled, or engaged this monstrosity in some epic confrontation of strength and skill, but the truth is far more mundane. Unfortunately for my would-be murderer, I am a Loremaster of all things in this world, and know many details. One of those little tidbits of knowledge including the critical weakness that all Wickermen suffer from. As I told you, each one of these wretched automatons relies upon a single connection between them and the puppet held by their controller. Something that has been broken. Something missing a piece of itself. Such as a hand with a single finger missing, for instance. The main component will hang around the neck of the Wicker Man, the missing piece hanging in identical fashion upon the controlling puppet. As the burning monster of Grinstadt bore down, my eyes were drawn to the scorched husk of an unfortunate cat bound beneath the Wicker Man's head that was missing one of its paws. I struck but a single time, my blade obliterating the feline corpse and severing the connection between the construct and its master. The Wicker Man collapsed in an instant, as the dar animating it scattered back into the winds. Standing amidst the ruin of Grinstadt, I followed what traces of magic lingered in the air, and located the miserable creature that had destroyed the town. The necromancer had known about my visits to Grinstadt, and had attacked it in the hopes of claiming the various trinkets and baubles I had often brought them in hopes of discovering some secret power or exotic form of magic. Fool. He mocked me as I approached, telling of how the people of Grinstadt had woken to supernatural darkness covering their town, and the Wicker Man awaiting them in the streets. It had massacred them, twisting and crawling through the alleyways in impossible fashion to slice apart any who attempted to flee the flames it belched upon their homes. He spoke of how the men and women had tried to fight back against the monster, their arrows and bullets striking the construct time and again to no effect, as it simply walked through a hail of missile fire. How some brave souls had taken up swords and halberds in a desperate bid to hold back the Wicker Man, but found it uncaring of their strikes as it continued to reap a bloody toll. Over the course of a single evening, every soul who had called Grinstadt home had been sliced into ribbons or consumed by the flames. Their precious baubles and toys proving of little use to the necromancer. But he assured me that he'd find a use for their bodies so as not to be wasteful. I recall him musing about perhaps he could construct an even mightier creation if he used them as base materials, perhaps attempting his hand at a Necrofex Colossus. As I'm sure you can tell from the fact that I'm recounting this story to you, he never had the opportunity. In any event, take this story as a tale of caution, should you ever encounter these sinister constructs so beloved by necromancers. No matter how their form may vary, or how powerful the wizard animating them may be, they all suffer from that one crucial weakness. Aim for the head, and seek out an incomplete talisman that will be around the neck. It will need to be something made out of flesh, something that once bore life. The ritual to craft a Wicker Man requires the controlling piece to be in that area, and if you can remove or destroy it, the automaton will collapse. Looks like you've finished your ale. I'll leave out the keg so you can help yourself. Tonight, I've prepared a lovely dinner when hunger strikes you. Be sure to get some rest, and we'll speak again soon. What happened to the necromancer? Well, I shouldn't reveal all of my secrets, but I will say that as a Loremaster, my knowledge extends into many different subjects, including ways to inflict true and terrible suffering. I have heard it said by travelers that if you listen carefully in the Drakewald on cold nights, you can still hear the agonized screams of the one and only soul that remains to nourish my flourishing garden. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I can't promise how frequently these will come out, but I hope to give you all a ton of spooky content to celebrate October. In any event, I want to thank all of my lovely patrons for their continued support. Without all of you, I wouldn't be able to do all of the research and writing I've been up to lately, nor support the community contests I've been leading in recent times. Even those of you donating as little as $1 help out very, very much. I'd like to give a special shout out to the following individuals for their particularly generous support: Eric, CJ Ubusta, Charles Bode, Jeffrey Ramers, Wendell Short Eyes, Sign of the Emperor, and Higgins the Seagull. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and I hope you'll enjoy the next episode. Bye.